Hi there, so it's back in the time machine today to have a look at many maples that you may already have or are easy to get hold of and how they're going to look in the future. Another maple that's a firm favourite the world over really. Can't predate the 80s because it wasn't found until the 80s. So here's one I do have at home, really enjoy Jerre Swartz. And again, for reference, this is a witch's broom. So this was actually found in the USA growing on another tree. I think it was a bloodgood. So it's kind of a mutant branch that's once it was taken, once a sign was cut and cultivated, it's turned into this kind of amazing, very, very dense, tufty little tree. The witch's brooms are a group, like Shana is another one, for example. So it's another way of sort of genetic variance has come to play. We can see that the sort of pinky redness of the initial leaves here, but because it's very, very shaded by this tree next to it, it's remained almost completely green. So if you've watched many of my videos, I hope you have, you'll know I've got one of these and it's bright pink, and it stays bright pink all year because it gets a good dollop of morning sun, to be honest. But again, it's interesting to note that in all this time I can reach to the top of it. It's not become an enormous tree, so definitely a kind of dwarf variant, but one that looks kind of great in sun, looks great in shade, and really quite unusual. I say it's a bit like Shana. They're very, very dense leaves. These are rather different to Shana, but they have that kind of common feature about them. So Jerre Swartz, every garden should probably have a Jerre Swartz, and again at this size, not growing too fast, would be great for pot container gardening, or just if you don't have that much space really. I'm pretty sure you could keep one of those on a patio or something. Why not? So 2008, 2009, 2010 were definitely good years here for planting maples. And this particular fella, Harusami, I do apologise if my Japanese isn't brilliant, but I do my best. But what really interests me is how this has grown literally from the ground up, which again is useful to know because it's not taking much kind of linear space. And actually, because you can sort of see through it, you know, it's very dense up here, that's lovely, but it's not going to sort of take so much visual space up in the garden really. Leaves, kind of interesting. Another one of these serrated sort of edge, a little bit of serration to it. And again, the more you sort of look at these plants, I think it starts to form patterns in your head really. And there's certain variations, certain sort of the upturned vase shape, or the serrated leaves, or the smaller leaves, how sort of cut they are into the centre there that you can see. But in those years, I'd say this is a pretty, you know, decent sized tree really. But if you're looking for something to fit in the right space in the garden, or you know, that's what you're after, and that's quite an interesting proposition really. Sun-wise, doesn't seem to mind too much. I'll just pop around the other side of the tree. It's always good to have a walk around actually, so we get a feel for how it gets on in various conditions. And there we have leaves in full sun. It's about 1 o'clock here now, but not a hint of scorch on there, whatever. It is quite sheltered here though, and that, as I said before, really helps. It's not going to get sort of a combination of direct sun and loads of wind as well really. It's just a nice, interesting shaped tree. So I'll try and show you this from 2009. I think there's a learning here though. So it's an Arboretum group tree, which are typically sort of red common maples. Vandermoss red. And when you look at it, it kind of clearly isn't. It's lovely actually. It's more a green with a sort of hint of red perhaps. But the way this has been planted, and I apologise, it's sort of hard to see because it's right underneath two other trees. It's sort of hard to see where the red sort of comes into it. Lovely habit, straight from the bottom. I'm standing under it quite happily. So it's almost like a canopy type situation. If we just move to another side of the tree, we see it slightly better that way. It's a bit hard to see, I'm afraid, with the sunlight, but I think you can just about see it is red. It is a deeper colour up onto the canopy. So again, another learning. That's definitely because it's under so much shade here that actually the trees decided to produce more green chlorophyll to get the most of the light, and that's why we've got that colour variance. Lovely leaves actually, a little bit of Sakazuki like, but they're sort of fat in the middle and then go to a point. So again, another sort of genetic variant that we can see. We do have some classic maples here. Another advantage I think of seeing them out and about is the fact you can see this Crimson Queen, which again, nice and easy to get hold of. Nice sort of bush-like shape to the plant really, and really does cascade down a bit more than some of the other dissectums. But lovely to see them planted together. So sometimes it's just, you miss that. So often these trees are just there in isolation. But they're so compact actually. I mean, these are very old, but they're so compact, they're nice little mounds. Yeah, sort of why not? If you've got some space, 2 or 3 of these together would make a nice setting. Again, you've definitely got some dieback here. It's quite an exposed location, but interestingly, a bit like my garnet at the front of the house, it's quite tough. I think these sort of weeping dissectums are really quite tough little trees really. So wouldn't underestimate how well they'll do in an exposed kind of area. So for me, one of the classic linear elobrums, 98, so an older tree, 25 years old. And quite interestingly, there's the one that I know in Dorset, I guess is a similar age to that, and yet this one's done so much better. Obviously this one is liked where it is. Apologies for the noise there, but just a lovely tree. And again, the strap-like leaves, something different, something interesting. Lovely structure actually. You sort of see through it and appreciate it from its structure inside, I suppose. Again, that's done very well. A bit older than some trees here, but hasn't got to a ridiculous size, but nonetheless well worth adding to a collection and really easy, at least in the UK, to get hold of, so one to look out for. So a lovely little tree, Edinburgh Man. I think I've seen this one. I'm kind of guessing, but I think this is one you can get hold of, but I couldn't resist taking some video here. Very interesting habit because it really has split from the middle and gone off and spread apart in different directions. And actually on the sun facing side of things, just gorgeous. That's telling me that this one's quite adaptable. You can say some maples are sort of tolerant to the sun, but some almost seem to enjoy it. And these aren't burnt leaves, they really are in an excellent state. Fair enough, some of the growth inside is not done so well, but again, I suspect that this year, because it's been sort of more overcast and quite wet that they've done incredibly well. Just looking at the light fall through the leaves there, just gorgeous. And then as the sun sort of falls differently on it here, we're kind of into sort of orange colours, which is lovely. And then over here, very much back to green again. So again, good to know. Spreading habit, very nice, but not huge, not an enormous tree. But just gorgeous and really sun tolerant. So definitely one to remember for later. So literally every time I come here, I see something different. But when I say see something different, it's probably kind of memory priming. I've had something to do with that tree at some point. So I do hope you've watched that video I did recently of me going and buying a Killarney, because it's an absolutely lovely tree actually. Mine, because it's had a good dollop of sun, it's already got some very interesting orangey colours to it. But I know there's another one here, so I'll probably include that actually. But I didn't know this one was here. So again, over a decade and a half, it's done really well. Nice sort of, grows fairly much in the bottom, but quite an open structure to it. It's lovely actually. The wind's actually moving the tree around as well. But in that time scale, in the ground, just looking lovely. Definitely a low spreader really. I mean, I think you can sort of get the idea that the top of it's not huge. It is wider than it is tall, so one needs to be aware of that and kind of, manage that. But this is a really interesting cultivar for me, because this one you grow because it's lovely anyway, but you mainly grow it because of its autumn colours. So if I can get back here in the autumn, I hope to. I remember its brother just further up in the Arboretum, looking just fantastic. So let's hope this will be a good year for autumn colours. And on that note, it is difficult to exactly predict when colorations are going to show really, and when colours will change for the autumn. Again, here at Westonbirt, the admission price actually goes up slightly because it's just lovely. But again, the season ticket just avoids that problem. Loads of Samaras again. Loads of them. I think it's been a funny year. I think that here in the UK, the early part of the year has sort of frightened the tree into producing loads of offspring, thinking it's in trouble because March was a terrible month. And then later on in the year, the weather's been kind of wet and not too bright and quite forgiving, really. But just really, really happy to find such a lovely example of a tree that I own. So another sort of classic Japanese maple, that this time from 1985, Shishigashira, the lion's mane Japanese maple. I've seen this before here actually, and I can't quite get my head around it. It's certainly put on a load of height, and it's really tall, and maybe because it's sort of surrounded by other taller trees and it's reaching for the light, I don't know. But I've seen other Shishigashiras in other locations that have really branched out and gone all sorts of different directions. There's a place called Bat's Arboretum I've done videos on, that they've got a magnificent Shishigashira which looks very, very different to this. So amazing how what is genetically the same, because it's definitely the same cultivar, can develop a very different look depending on its environment, really. But lovely nonetheless, and really upright. The basics are there, but I've seen these sort of go off in all sorts of different directions. But a lovely tree, and again, one that's a bit different. The leaves are sort of quite unusual, really dark green stem, which looks really familiar. It's almost like my Shishigashira at home looks like a branch off this tree, very, very much so, really. Sort of little clumps of branches sort of grow out into little clumps like this. But a super, super tree, and again, something that's rather different. So really, despite this being a tree I don't own, this is one I really would like to. So they put its sort of common name on there, the trident maple. And if I show you the leaves, and I think you'll understand the attraction. They're most extraordinary curled over leaves, really. And some of the newer growth again is larger and a bit more open, so you can see what's going on. And indeed, there's the trident, I suppose, 3 points. This tree nearly 20 years old. Nice habit. Doesn't seem to be, it's in quite a bit of sun actually. Doesn't seem to be phased by that. And again, maybe that's sometimes a sort of general rule that we can adopt. So I find my Okushimo seems to be really sun tolerant. And maybe these curled over leaves do protect them from drying out a little bit. I think it's a reasonable assumption. Lots of moss on here. So obviously this side must be north facing. But you know, it all adds to the character really. So I'd love to, if anyone out there spots one of these, just as a very kind chap mentioned that they got a Kalani available at one of the nurseries I frequent, would be good to know. And if you grow acers, please can we have some? Looks fantastic. I might sort of dive into the tree almost to get to this label. But nearly a 20-year-old Filotranto. Again, know I've seen this out and about. These are fairly modern cultivars. I am absolutely sure there's one of these in Dorset in the UK, in one of the National Trust properties. But interestingly, the one I've seen before is in a very exposed kind of lovely little, grouping of trees really. But this one just in a slightly better position perhaps, a bit more shelter, has done incredibly well. And in those years, it's turned into a nice tree. Again, I'd say medium growth. It's not sort of got ridiculous. Some can be a lot taller than that, but medium to fast, should we say. And that sort of very broad spreading habit, which is lovely. So linearly lobum, I think that's how you pronounce it, because it's got these lovely sort of strap-like, very, very long leaves, really. So they're just part of a group, should we say. They're not a different species, but they're part of a group that has this really interesting habit. So again, good to get out there, good to spot these things. Put them on the wish list, perhaps. I've got a Hubs Red Willow, I've got Cotonuito. But yeah, I'd definitely get more of these because I think they just offer something a little bit different. So I think it'd be lax of me not to sort of show you that, Acer is a very, very big group of trees, really. And we're kind of used to the Schirroswanums, definitely the Palmatums, the Dissectums, of course. But here's another sort, which are still acers. So fairly different to some of the sort of classic Japanese ones that we see. But often, in 20 years, that's gone straight upright. So some of these varieties can do that. So in the right space, that can be really useful. And maybe a tree like that can offer some shade in a garden quite quickly without taking too much sort of lateral space, really. So it's still an acer, it's still lovely. And kind of just worth bearing in mind that the acer group is a massive group of plants. It really is, including the sort of Acer saccharinums, which is the sugar maple that you get in Canada and stuff like that. So really, when we're talking about Japanese maples, it's just a tiny, tiny subset. So here we have Atropopyrium, which is just a generic but classic kind of red leaf maple. And again, I think this almost forms the benchmark for these trees. About 14 years old. Some nice colours through the leaves, and reaches that kind of height. So if we treat that as a kind of an average for a tree of that age, really, perhaps, because it is kind of generic, but nothing wrong with that at all. It's just absolutely lovely. It's just that, say, something like a bloodgood is a kind of variant on that, or the dissectums are completely different to that, really. They're sort of genetically quite different. But these tend to be really hardy. They're sort of not highly cultivated. They do very well on their own roots. They don't need to be grafted, really. And, just an available, affordable, lovely addition to any garden. So another Edna Bergman here, which I think is well worth including, because it's quite a lot different looking to the other one, and also I love the adopted for a lovely grandma and grandpa, which is gorgeous, really. A little bit of protection around the base in case of, I think there's deer wander around this park, so just protecting it like that. And here has done really well, actually, but very, very closely grown next to 3 other maples. You've got some really big sort of pines and bigger trees around it as well, and that's kind of thrived in its environment. So again, another lesson perhaps is that when we're looking at maples, yes, they can survive and sort of make it through and they do okay, but if they don't die back, if they're really enjoying where you put them and they're being looked after, they've got the right amount of shade, not too much wind, etc., etc., there's a big difference in growth rate, actually, and how well that tree is ultimately going to perform. Can't really help but include this one as well, another 2009 planting. I don't think I've seen this about, but it's a shame because it's a lovely sort of lace leaf. But again, just showing that these are really much slower growing. If you've got dissectums that weep, they are generally much slower growing. The exception is the upright Siriu, which is a sort of lace leaf too. But I do love how dark this leaf is. It's lovely red petioles here, little stems, and really dark foliage on top. So again, perhaps one to look out for. Of course, sometimes I don't know whether it's I haven't seen it before, or I'm just not kind of switched onto it. So again, perhaps now I've seen it here and I've recorded it, it might just jog a memory when I'm out and about, really. But yeah, I really like that. And it's so small and compact and interesting, and very, very dense. I mean, I know it's sort of a bit constricted by this around the outside, but really sort of lovely dense foliage. So one to look. So you have an 18-year-old tree. It's the Corallinum group again, sort of very popular here. Probably confusing because it sort of means coral-like or pink, but it certainly isn't that now. But the leaves do have this lovely green colour with almost like a mottling effect to them. So what I will try and do, and let me know in the comments if that's a benefit to you, is sort of show these trees as they progress over time, really. So ideally you need to see this tree in the spring with all its sort of pink spring colours, then now as well to see what it's going to look like at that point, and then obviously in the autumn to see how well it's going to progress. But today we're sort of talking about growth rates and shape and stuff like that, and we see it's a lovely little spreading tree. It's sort of a big tree in miniature almost, if that makes some kind of sense. But just lovely. I mean, fantastic for a container, fantastic for probably bonsai, I would guess, because it's just obviously quite slow growing. Not to say you can't keep trimming trees back and keep working at them and hold their growth rate down, but why do that when you can pick the right tree in the first instance, really? And once again, just looking through the leaves, absolutely gorgeous. And quite open too, actually, so it doesn't look big in the garden, which is lovely. I thought I'd include this one because it's unusual. So 2008, it's had a few years in the ground, and this is a pine bark maple. So again, we're often interested in leaf structure and all the rest of it, and the leaves of this tree are fine. They're really nice, pretty sort of palmate leaves. But if we get nice and close, you can see that it's got really, really unusual bark. So again, amongst a collection of maples, good to see how this develops, because on a very immature tree, it just wouldn't look like this. This takes a bit of aging, really, and a bit of time. And in fact, if you look at the sort of the newer growth towards the end of the tree, it doesn't really look anything special. So nice to go out there and see what's going to happen in the future, really. Nice upturned vase habit, you know, straight from the base. Quite an open structure. I'm standing in the middle of it. And again, in those type of time scales, medium growth, I would say. It's not towering above me, but it's a decent sized tree nonetheless, really. But an interesting one. And I think if you're collecting maples, after a while, after you've got a few, you tend to look for something a bit different. So certainly out of leaf, that's going to look quite good, really, with its rather stunning kind of bark. Another lovely tree from the sort of 2005 planting era. Benigaza, so Beni being red. Once again, why red? On this one you can see sort of new growth, clearly is red. And then as this is in a lovely sheltered sort of space, it's faded over time. So you do find some of the very modern cultivars, sometimes they do hold on to their red colour a bit longer. But what gets me about this tree is its crazy habit. I don't think I've seen a tree that spreads quite so quickly as this. So if we get underneath and have a look, you know, you just want to almost lie down under that almost, and it's almost like a tent. But certainly going to take up a lot of space in the garden width-wise. But maybe that's what you want. Maybe you don't want the height. So really, really interesting tree, actually. Massively laden with Samaras. And just again, something different in terms of shape. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of these videos. If you are, if you could like and subscribe to the channel, that'd be fantastic. And please hit the notification bell as well, because that way you'll know when I upload more. I'm really, really pleased with how things have progressed, and this little channel sort of growing quite nicely, really. So thanks for all those that subscribed already, and a special thanks to all those that ask questions or, you know, have ideas. And please let me know if you want any more different content, because we can do that. And I hope to see you soon in another video. Cheers.